For today's movie review, I'll be reviewing X-Men Apocalypse, the 10th installment of the X-Men franchise, and the fourth film to be directed by Bryan Singer, who directed the first two X-Men movies along with X-Men Days of Future Past, and the first legitimate X-Men movie to come after X-Men Days of Future Past. Granted, you had Deadpool in between, but let's be fair, Deadpool was its own thing. But back to the subject at hand here. This movie had a lot to live up to because, again, it is the first legitimate X-Men movie to come after X-Men Days of Future Past, and this was the fourth movie to be directed by Bryan Singer. And on the one hand, we all knew that this was probably going to be a good movie in general, but probably not as good as X-Men Days of Future Past. And when early reviews of this movie started popping up, seems like none of the critics like this movie all that much, which really concerned me because this is a movie directed by Bryan Singer. So, is X-Men Apocalypse the first real bad X-Men movie by Bryan Singer? As for the plot of X-Men Apocalypse, this ancient mutant called Apocalypse awakens from his deep slumber to only discover that humans have taken over a good majority of Earth while most mutants are hiding, and he feels the need to find four powerful mutants and essentially cleanse the Earth of all of humanity so that only mutants can survive. And it's up to Professor X, Mystique, and a new generation of X-Men to battle this ancient mutant. In terms of what I liked about X-Men Apocalypse, the movie's really fast-paced, as in, the movie goes by so fast, I totally forgot I was watching a 2.5-hour film, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. And I also like how X-Men Days of Future Past affects some of the characters in this film. Case in point, the way Mystique is viewed now, she's viewed as an inspiration for all the other younger mutants. And Magneto, in the past couple of films with Michael Fassbender playing the character, he's been good. Magneto in this movie is essentially the emotional center, and he has some of the best scenes in the entire movie. And I also like the fact that they bring in Quicksilver a lot more in this film. Because with the last one, it's like, okay, we're going to use him for one mission, and that's it. And that was like the one scene everybody liked, along with the character. This year, he's in the movie a lot more. He's essentially the comical relief. And again, he has some of the best scenes in the entire movie as well. And I do like some of the costuming in the movie. Some of them, I'll get to some of the other costumes that I like. I thought that the costume for Magneto looks great. The costumes for the other characters look great. Psylocke looks like her comic book counterpart. And also, I like the overall depiction of Apocalypse in this movie, because when I usually think of Apocalypse from the comics, I think of like this giant brute who's like this power-hungry tyrant that has like this deep booming voice. In the movie, he's kind of like this ancient evil sorcerer kind of thing going on. And I like that his motivation is simple. He just wants to cleanse the earth of all of humanity. And even with some of the cheesy dialogue, I feel like the actor playing him really made the most of his dialogue. I think my only problem with the character was his voice. It's not bad, it's just, from time to time, he could, totally speak normally, but then his voice would just really deepen for absolutely no reason. Unless he was yelling, but when he's just casually talking, it just deepens for absolutely no reason. And I like the fact that they don't go into his origin that much, because if you know his origin from the comics, it's really complicated. So at least with the movie here, they just simplified it with him being just the first mutant. That's basically all you need to know about the character. In terms of what I disliked about the movie, as I said about the costumes earlier, I do like a good majority of the costumes. It's just the costumes that you see the X-Men wearing at the end of the movie look really out of place, because those look like something that takes place in a much more modern day setting. Then again, the other problem I had was the time period of the movie. I never really got the sense that this movie took place within the 80s, because when you're watching something like X-Men First Class or X-Men Days of Future Past, you totally get drenched in the time period in which those movies take place in. X-Men Apocalypse? You don't really get that. Outside of a few of the characters talking about Star Wars Return of the Jedi and hearing Quicksilver listening to Sweet Dreams. Beyond that, nothing much. And the Four Horsemen were kind of a disappointment, because on one hand, you have two characters that were never horsemen in the comics, mainly Magneto and Storm. The only other time I've seen them as Horsemen of the Apocalypse was during X-Men Evolution during the early thousands. That was it, but beyond that, they're typically not a part of the Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse. And as for the other two members, Psylocke and Archangel, they really had no purpose in the film, other than the fact that, okay, here's the other two horsemen. That's it. Like Psylocke, okay, she looks the part, just she doesn't act the part. And she barely talks as it is. Like, I feel like she has like maybe 4 or 5 lines of dialogue, and you don't really get a sense of her character. Archangel, on the other hand, I liked slightly more, only because we do go through the arc of, okay, here's Angel, he becomes Archangel. That's about it. Other than that, another disappointment. And the movie does have a few plot holes here and there, because at the end of X-Men Days of Future Past, it's implied that Mystique, while under the geist of William Stryker, saves Wolverine. Yet in this movie, we see that Wolverine apparently was captured by William Stryker. So, what happened between Days of Future Past and Apocalypse? I'm not sure, but they don't explain it. During the climax of the movie, I felt that the Deus Ex Machina happened in terms of how they defeat Apocalypse. I'm not gonna give too much away, but I just felt it wasn't built up more. Also, I had a big problem with the opening like 5 minutes because it felt so out of place. I get that it's setting up Apocalypse along with his 4 horsemen, but it feels like a different movie almost. Feels like I'm watching either like Stargate or The Fifth Element. It felt out of place. For my final verdict of X-Men Apocalypse, this movie isn't as good as X-Men Days of Future Past or X2 X-Men United, but I think X-Men Apocalypse is easily like the 3rd or 4th best X-Men movie. Granted, it's not perfect by any means, but I still think that X-Men Apocalypse is an entertaining film. Before I give my final rating, what did everyone else have to say about X-Men Apocalypse? I'm kind of confused as to why this movie's getting like mixed and negative reviews, but for my final rating of X-Men Apocalypse, I give it a 4 out of 5. So, out of the X-Men movies, which one's your favorite? And see you later.